Good morning, Metalheads Internet. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown. And today we're looking at the latest album from British Lion entitled The Burning. This is the second studio album from this UK hard rock crew, British Lion. And if you've heard of them, it's very likely that you've heard of them through its association with another famous English musician by the name of Steve Harris, founding member and longtime bassist for Iron Maiden. A man inarguably crazy important to hard rock and heavy metal and the broader spectrums of these genres. Now trying his hand at some good old-fashioned classic rock. There are some elements of the Iron Maiden sound in here, but that's about it. The real association pretty much begins and ends with Steve Harris here. He started up this project in 2012 with the self-titled British Lion debut album. Since then, not a whole lot has happened. To be honest, I had completely forgotten about this project. I mean, with Iron Maiden being objectively a way bigger and busier band, I think it's safe to say that his priority very quickly became Iron Maiden. And I frankly didn't really complain because I wasn't really huge on that debut album. I just kind of thought it was really weak, generic, kind of meat and potatoes, hard rock, nothing really that special about it. I didn't even think it was really that well made. But at this current moment, Iron Maiden aren't up to a whole lot, so this gives Steve Harris the opportunity to return to British Lion and hopefully make up for where I felt he went wrong on that debut album. But unfortunately, it seems like I personally expected a little bit too much there, as The Burning suffers from all the same problems I had with that debut album. It's lame, it's generic, it's run-of-the-mill, it's literally meat and potatoes, hard rock and heavy metal, the kind of stuff that you play for your dad after he's like, there's no good music anymore. Not objectively terrible or offensive or anything like that, but just disappointing and bland and frankly boring. And honestly, I feel like a lot of people are just giving this album a pass because it has Steve Harris on it. Like, no one wants to say that it's really bad because it's got a fucking member of Iron Maiden on it. And to shit on him would be, I guess, in some sense, to shit on Iron Maiden. I don't fucking know. That's certainly the feeling I get when I look at reviews from Kerrang and Consequence of Sound and some other media outlets. Either that or we literally listen to completely different records, because there's not a single inspired or entertaining moment on this album, and honestly, I was close to turning it off after the third song. And there are a lot of reasons for this. I mean, the sound mix, for one, is just awful across this entire record. Vocals sound okay, but the guitars are wafer thin, no impact, no punch whatsoever. The drums are weak. The bass pedal in particular literally sounds like milk being poured into a bowl of Rice Krispies. Just these little pops and these little crackles that have absolutely no weight. Even the bass feels really toned down here, and that is especially weird considering, again, this is Steve goddamn Harris. And all these songs are generally really poorly arranged and just not that interesting. Now, to be entirely fair as well, I will concede that traditional hard rock and heavy metal is itself pretty repetitive because people do expect certain things from these sounds. People don't really want anything really expansive or progressive out of this genre. I understand and I accept that. But that said, I don't think it's too much to ask for something that's still well composed. And I also don't think it's too much to ask that you understand that this songwriting style has problems that you need to address. For instance, heavy metal and hard rock songs don't really work as well the longer you stretch them out, unless you are progressing to something, unless there's some kind of big change, unless there's something emotionally happening within the song. If you're just jamming away on some riffs and half-baked choruses, then no one's gonna give a fuck after 4 minutes. And every single song on here runs up to about 5 to 6 minutes, making the entire album an hour long. There is no need for any traditional hard rock or heavy metal album to be an hour long. Let's make that fucking clear right now. You compare this to Steve Harris's other band, Iron Maiden, and the contrast doesn't just become glaring and awkward, it becomes almost laughable. It's true that Iron Maiden has a lot of really long songs, but these songs typically always build to something. They're part of a larger narrative, or they display some really amazing musicianship, or some really inventive songwriting or passages. That's not happening with British Lion. They are just kind of jamming away. They sound like a bunch of 50-something dads jamming in a pub. British Lion, whether it's intentional or not, kind of created the most generic, by-the-books hard rock album. Like, when I picture hard rock in my head, everything I see is represented in this album, and it's just poorly mixed, poorly arranged, and honestly just not that fun. I am more than willing to forgive hard rock and heavy metal's inherent lack of originality so long as it's well composed and entertaining. And as I've already explained pretty clearly, I don't think The Burning is either. If you're willing to turn your brain off, you can definitely still have some fun with this thing. I mean, it is still like hard rock. There are things that are inherently pleasing on this album. You know, there's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned hard rock riff or a good old-fashioned hard rock solo or chorus. I think the general aesthetic of the record is also a lot better than the debut album. I mean, just look at that album artwork, for instance. It looks a lot more professional than that plain Jane lion's crest that was thrown on the first album. But even if you can really sit down and get into these songs, can you honestly say that you would pick them over any number of Iron Maiden tracks, over an entire Iron Maiden album, or for that matter, any number of traditional hard rock and heavy metal bands currently out there that are making objectively more entertaining and better composed music? Because I personally really wouldn't. And for the record, didn't. And not long after listening to this album, I went, damn, I'm hungry for some hard rock and heavy metal. So I went and listened to Mind Freeze by Hunt, which is only a couple weeks old by now, and honestly, objectively way better made. I mean, what that album gets right is literally what this album gets wrong. It's shorter, it's better arranged, better produced, and way more energetic. And full disclosure, on my second listen of this album, I just stopped it halfway through and said, fuck it, and immediately turned on Mind Freeze, because it's just a better album. It delivers everything that this doesn't, and at this point I have to assume can't deliver. Like, seriously, if any band took 8 years to release any album and it was as generic and plain and uninspired as this, y'all would toss it out immediately, regardless of who was on it. But unfortunately, in this scenario, we can't do that because it's got Steve Harris, so we're just gonna suck up to this album, and it's got riffs. Great, whatever. I didn't want to give it a 1.5 out of 5. I didn't want to go this low, but I kind of feel like I have to. It's just a really bad album. It's incompetently arranged and produced. All the songs are way too long. There's no real energy, no real oomph, no spice to anything. It's the equivalent to eating like a really cold, dry piece of meatloaf. You know, maybe your dad loves meatloaf. Maybe your dad is a meat and potatoes guy. He doesn't give a shit and he's just looking for food. Good for him. Let him have his fun. I want fucking steak. I want prime rib. I want a roast rack of lamb. Give me something with flavor. Give me some meat. Give me some fat. If you typed in heavy metal on Google right now, you would objectively find a way better song within seconds. Not an album, a song, a single song that has more firepower than this album. If you like this album, man, good on you. It sounds like I'm in the minority to begin with. If that's the case, so be it. But if you're sucking up to this album just because it has Steve Harris on it, take a good look in the mirror, man, because that's just fucking sad. The man has made way better music many times over. And if you can seriously sit here and tell me, with no irony whatsoever, that you'd rather listen to this over Seventh Son of a Seventh Son or Number of the Beast, then I don't know what to fucking tell you at that point. Bland, uninspired, meat and potatoes hard rock. Honestly, if Steve Harris wasn't even on this record, if this was a no-name band, we probably wouldn't have even looked at it. Not even in one of the albums I missed video, because there's just nothing to talk about other than that association and how lame it is. The only good thing about this whole experience is I'll probably forget about this album by the time my next video review goes online. 1.5 out of 5. It's bad. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.